I remember one day I was sitting there and I was listening to it, and she said, my parents, my dad was a pastor, and they raised me, and I knew the presence of God was real. So I was so angry with God for a lot of the different church splits and just some of the hurt that I'd gone through.
Welcome to Faith Trailblazers, where we showcase the forerunners in ministry, those who are advancing the kingdom of God inside and outside the church walls. I'm your host, Tammy Lark. With us today is Prophet Jon West. He is on the pastoral staff of Christian Center Shreveport. Welcome, Jon. How are you today?
Doing pretty good. I'm 2 cups of coffee in, so fully caffeinated and ready to rock.
Great. Okay, Jon. So why don't we start with how you came to faith? Tell us that story.
Well, I can still remember the day when I was 5 years old when I was saved first. My family lived in Virginia at the time, and I was probably one of those products of a great children's ministry. I still remember the face of the lady. I don't remember her name. She was an older lady with one of those, blue hair kind of old ladies. And I can remember every Sunday she had an altar call. And I remember one day I was sitting there and I was listening to it, and she said, they had a couple people come down to the front, and she said, I really feel like there's one more person out there that needs to get saved. And I was like, that's me. And so I went up, and to this day, in my mind, I can still see my hands folded, looking down, standing in a circle, and that's when I first received the Lord. Now, I would say that I felt another fresh connection to the Lord, and kind of when I was about 13, and then when I was 19 or 18, somewhere around in there. Growing up, I did not, I went through numerous church splits, partially because of the prophetic, because my dad was a prophetic person. I didn't know all that at the time, but I found out that out later. But when I was 18 or 19, I basically just said, to heck with all this. I'm not doing, I remember one day in prayer being just so angry at God that I just said, I'm out of here. And I said, I'm going to go do drugs. I'm going to go get drunk. I'm going to go sleep with as many people as I can. And so I just left. I quit church for at least a year and a half-ish. I started hanging out with drug dealers and just going to, just different parties and of just different circles. You know how it is, party, you get your party there. And what was funny was I never did any of those things that I set out to do. I've never done any of those things to this day in my life, because in my teen years, the presence of God, I knew the presence of God was real. And, my parents, my dad was a pastor, and they raised me, and I knew the presence of God was real. So, some people have testimonies of being rescued, and some people have testimonies of protection. And even though I was in that kind of environment, I was protected from, a lot of, the bad decisions that I could have been into. And so when, my sister had started to go back to church, and she actually went to the church that I'm on staff at now, and she invited me to come one day, and I remember I went, and I thought it was weird. It was weird. I'd never been in a church that had flags with people dancing. At the time, they had a dance team. They all wore white, and I was like, this is weird. But I felt the presence of God, and so my intellectual mind would get in this wrestling match, because the presence of God was there, but even though the outward, I was like, I don't even understand what's going on here. This is one of the reasons I don't like church, is because of these people. And I'll never forget, though, one day, the presence was so real to me, though, and so strong back then, that I remember being in service one day, and I'm shortening it a little bit, but I was so angry with God for a lot of the different church splits and just some of the hurt that I'd gone through, that my pastor, who now, Pastor Tim, was like, just tell the Lord how you feel. We were in this real high moment of worship, and I remember I just sat down on my chair and I just said, God, I hate you. I hate you. Because that's just where I was at. I was like, I hate you, and I hate you. And every time I said I hate you, I would get hit with this huge, heavy wave of the presence of God. And I heard him say, I love you. And I'd say, I hate you. And I'd hear him say, I love you. And then I would say, I said it 3 or 4 times, and it just broke me. It still breaks me today. And I finally, I was like, I give up. Like at that moment, I was like, I'm wrong. And that's why I always tell people, like, you can argue with God all you want, but you're wrong. He'll sit there and listen to you, and he's not afraid of that. He's not afraid of those emotions that we have. But how long is it going to take you to figure out that you're wrong? And so, at that moment, I just said, okay, I'm coming back to the Lord, and I haven't looked back since from that. So, I mean, faith is a journey. I mean, I would say that I had a 3-step process. I'm shortening a little bit, but that's kind of how I came, to back to the Lord is really what I would say. And so I'm thankful that He protected me and rescued me from myself.
Yes, that's great. Sometimes I tell people God's going to win. If He's got His hand on you and He's chasing you, He's going to win. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love how you had that moment.
Yeah.
At the altar.
It's He will win, and I think it's hard too. Especially if you're a parent that has a kid away from the Lord. I mean, my parents knew I was away from the Lord, and yet they prayed for me, and they had occasional conversations with me. Not anything like heavy-handed, but my dad would just be like, "Hey," I think that was one thing that I was really thankful for looking back is I had because I was a real jerk. Like, I mean, if somebody said like, John, where are you going to church? They're like, I'm not going anywhere. And they I would say, well, why not? It's like, because I don't effing want to. That's kind of was. And I had that mixture of people that told me like, hey, you're about to take a swan dive in the lake of fire. And people say, hey, God loves you. Why don't you come back? So it takes both.
Yeah, so before you mentioned prophetic a couple of times. So after the break, I would love to delve into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't want to miss this next segment where we unpack the prophetic. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Float Report, a premier relaxation center. We offer flotation therapy, and we are so excited to introduce our community to its amazing benefits. We have 2 float rooms, each with its own float pool, shower, and dressing area. Floating really helps reduce inflammation, and so it's great for people who suffer from chronic pain, whether it's fibromyalgia, arthritic pain, lower back, or muscle discomfort. Float Report, it's a whole new way to relax. You can contact us on our website or by phone, and we can't wait to see you soon.
I'm Tammy Lark, founder of Tammy Lark Ministries and the host of Faith Trailblazers right here on Lift TV. Our ministry is an addiction and prison ministry, and we do a lot of work in jails and prisons, and we bless those we minister to with a free on the inside Bible. These Bibles are purchased in bulk and they run about $6 each. If you would like to sow into what we're doing, I would encourage you to go to TammyLarkMinistries.com, or you can sow on Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal. Thank you for partnering with us to advance the kingdom of God. Welcome back to Faith Trailblazers. I'm your host, Tammy Lark. With us today is Prophet Jon West. So, John, before the break, you had mentioned the prophetic. So, how did you first know that you were prophetic?
I think when I started to, I think that one of the things I always tell people, like in the classes that we teach at the church, is I'm going to show you in the Bible and give you language for experiences you probably already have. You just don't have language for it. And so it was one where I was encountering the presence of God and realizing that He spoke. But in fact, I was, when it came to the prophetic, I thought it was weird, honestly. And when my pastor would talk about it, and he'd invite people to come down and get prayer for it, I was out the door. I was the first one out the door, because he'd say things like, "Well, you're going to be responsible for what you hear and all this," and I was like, "Man, I don't want this. I don't think so." And there was something because, there's the spirit world is a very wide world, and I've come to find we use this phrase all the time. There's good weird and there's bad weird. And bad weird can sometimes be immaturity, or it can be outright rebellion. And because of some of the immaturity that I saw, I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person. And so I was kind of reluctant to that. Now, once I got into some of the classes, and I started to see, I was like, okay. Now, I didn't know. For me, when I first started off, and this is how I think that God kind of tricks us a little bit. I started to just have a hunger to know about the prophetic. I had a guy who invited me up to Kansas City, where at that time, like, I got to see people like Paul Cain and other people move in prophecy. It was one of the first times I can remember going to a team of people and them giving me prophetic words, and they would give me. I'll never forget, I had a guy at this conference walk up to me and he gave me a piece of paper, and he had the word Nike on it, and it had the word "Now in the Kingdom Evangelism," and he made an acronym about it, and he had the K, and he said kindness. You're going to work in kindness. I, integrity. You're going to be a person of integrity. The N. I'm sorry, was the now. I started off with K. The N was now, or new. It was one of those, and then E was evangelism. So he said, look, you've got an evangelistic gift on you, and the Lord's gonna put it with the prophetic. And so when I heard that, I was like, yeah. And so for me, my journey started off in the prophetic because I was like, I want to see the power of God in evangelism. Now, I already liked apologetics. I had a natural bent toward that, but this was more of a thing where it's like, in my mind started shifting to going, wait a minute, the presence of God is more important in a conversation than me just, trying to correct everything that you believe. And of course, that's a part of it, but that's where I was, that's where I started my journey. And then because I just got hungry for the prophetic, I mean, I went to, and at the time at the church, it's where I started going to a lot of meetings with like Bob Jones and Bobby Connor, Paul Keith Davis, and a host of other different prophetic people. And I really just, I got connected and I started catching things. That's one of the things they say about the prophetic. It's better caught than taught.
Yes.
And looking back, once I realized, I didn't fully realize it at the time, but anytime I got around and I would see them, something in my spirit would go, I want to do this. And it wasn't that I wanted to be on a stage. In fact, at the time, I just was like, I just want to love Jesus. I don't even want to be in ministry. I'm just being honest. Even though I came back to the Lord, I still hated ministers on a large level. That's a long story. But I never wanted to do that. But then I just kind of, I had a radical encounter in this pursuit, and it happened in 2000. And I was really I just got hungry for the prophetic. I don't even know how to describe. They would offer a class at the church. My pastor taught it, and it was just like a level 1 class where they went through a book, and I took that class every time. Every time it was available, I took that class, even though I had read the book 5-6 times. I took it because I just wanted to be in the atmosphere. And then as I did that, I started to go, I had several things where the Lord, I just got this hunger to see Him move in power in people's different ways. And I started cultivating hearing His voice and ended up in a lot of just different situations. And I started to hear, I had a friend of mine who told me about people that like go to witches festivals and do prophetic words and dream interpretation. And when I heard that, I was like, that is, I want to do that.
And you've been to Burning Man a lot
Absolutely,
doing that, right?
absolutely,
Do you have
yeah.
any interesting stories from that?
Yeah, I've got several. But I want to get to that. But I think I want to show people today. I hope Revelation's always expanding, and so if I didn't set out to be a prophet. I didn't set out to do that. I set out to love Jesus, and I just followed each one of the prophetic words over my life at that time, and it expanded into that what I do now. And it started off though going with I started to hear about that, and so I thought, well, I want to do that. So what happens is I go. That's when I started to take a class on dream interpretation, and the only reason that I took this class is because these are the people that went to these festivals and things like that, and I'm like, I wanted to learn this, but I also wanted to say, my main goal was to get to the festival. So after the festival was over, I sat there. I mean, after the class was over, I went up to the person and I said, okay, now that I'm done, I said, I want to go to this festival. And the person goes, oh, you can't go to that festival. And I'm the Burning Man. And I was like, oh, really? They said, yeah, that's an invite only festival. You have to be invited. You can go on any of the other ones, but that one is particularly dark. And so we don't just invite anybody. And so I was like, okay. So I went into a little bit of a thing with the Lord where I'm like, Lord, the prophetic words that you've been giving me is I've got evangelism on my life and I'm called to the unchurched. And I'm like, these are the most unchurched people you can get, right?
Yep. Hold that thought. We will be right back.
Check out our new channel on Preach the Word Network. It's called Lift TV. Lift TV was created to bring you inspirational programming designed to uplift the entire family. You'll find shows that range from Bible study shows to live church services, from cooking shows to fitness shows. With our wide variety of programming, you're bound to find something that you're interested in. So tune in to Lift TV. It's channel 15 on Preach the Word Network. We'll see you there.
Welcome to Float Report, a premier relaxation center. We offer flotation therapy, and we are so excited to introduce our community to its amazing benefits. We have 2 float rooms, each with its own float pool, shower, and dressing area. Floating really helps reduce inflammation, and so it's great for people who suffer from chronic pain, whether it's fibromyalgia, arthritic pain, lower back, or muscle discomfort. Float Report, it's a whole new way to relax. You can contact us on our website or by phone, and we can't wait to see you soon.
Don't miss our new show on Lift TV. It's called Faith in Action. Faith in Action brings you inspiring stories of those who are putting their faith into action. Don't miss an episode. Friday mornings, 9:30 a.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to Faith Trailblazers. I'm your host, Tammy Lark. Before the break with Prophet Jon West, we were talking about Burning Man. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Yes, and so in the previous segment we were talking about how I ended up, and so I had actually the person told me I could not go to Burning Man. What Burning Man is, it's kind of hard to describe because it's an art festival, but it's basically a neo-pagan festival in the Nevada desert that now it's grown to 70,000 people go out there the week before Labor Day, and they build a city in the desert, and it's actually the third largest city in Nevada when they do this. And there's basically it's a libertarian paradise where there's no rules except for don't pee on the ground and don't throw trash. And so it's very, you have people out there that are doing art. You have people out there that are doing psychedelic shamanistic practices. You have people that are out there they have an orgy dome where if you want to go take part in an orgy, you can. And there's lots of people that are naked and
Wow.
all kinds of anything and everything that you can want to find, you can find out there. And so that's one of the reasons why, the person initially told me, they're like, well, it's an invite only because there's a very strong sexual element there too at the festival. So when the lady told me no, she said, she said no, and I was like, well, okay, that's it. So now that didn't change the fact that I was still doing locally. I was going out on the street and practicing, right? The prophetic on the street there, and so. And I, through the course of these, these two classes that I was taking, probably about, I don't know, probably close to 42 hours worth of training and dream interpretation. I probably talked to this instructor a total of 20 minutes during the whole thing just afterwards. So it wasn't like we were just like these really close friends. But she called me a month and a half after the class was over, and it was a little less than it was a month before the event, or 2 months before the event was going to happen. And she said, hey, I got your number from Pastor Tim. She said, I have not been able to, you haven't left my spirit ever since that you asked, and I told you no. And so she said, I know it's short notice, but would you like to come and be a part of the team? Right? And I said, I said yes. And so I started, I went out, the first year that I went out there was 2008. And, did it for, I went 7 times, was a part of the team there that went out into the desert. You go out into the desert, you bring all your food, all your water, and what we would do is we would set up a dream interpretation tent. And then because of the environment that we're in, we don't call it a prophetic word because people are like, what is that? So we'll call it a spiritual reading. We call it a spiritual reading. We had a menu board, so we have dream interpretation, spiritual spiritual reading, destiny direction. And I mean, it's all a prophetic word. We're just trying to get it in, right?
That's right.
So then we had that spiritual cleansing, which is like an inner healing, deliverance thing, and so people would come in and they would sit down and we would just prophesy over them or interpret a dream, and then we would see people come to the Lord. I think one of my favorite stories that I tell all the time. Oh, another thing I forgot that we mentioned, we did a thing called prophetic painting. And what we did was we had somebody who knew how to paint, not me, because I don't. But what they would do is they would ask the Lord for a picture, and then they would paint what they saw on the person, and they would give a prophetic word as they painted as to what it meant. Okay, so there was one day where a lady and her husband came in, and she we were talking to her, and so I'm praying, and the picture I see her in a city, and the city is completely walled off to where she only has one path, and there's this big bright light at the end of this path, and in the middle of this, where this bright light is there's a peacock feather, the O of a peacock feather is right there in the center, and then there's this light coming out of it. And I'm like, wow, okay. And so I'm like, Lord, what does this peacock feather mean? Nothing. I didn't get anything. So I'm struggling just to even communicate the picture, because I'm like, well, Lord, I can't just say this picture, because what about the peacock feather? Like, and I don't get anything, and I just hear the Lord go, okay, I want you to say this. And so I said, look, I don't fully understand what this is. And I said, but I see you in the city, and there's this light that you're not going to be able to escape from. I said, it's drawing you right now. And I said, you're going to move toward this. And I was sitting there a little bit frustrated because I didn't have it. I'm like, Lord, you got to give me something else. He gave me several other things, and they were very specific. And so I'm kind of battling in my mind that I'm like, this is really specific, but what about that peacock feather? That's like in the back of my mind. So one of my friends, who is the person who ushers people into different teams, she leans into my ear and she goes, I have something for this lady. Do you mind if I interrupt you? And I'm like, well, of course, because she never does that. So she leans over, and just because there's a lot of techno music going on, she whispers in her ear and starts talking to her. And I see the lady start to cry, and then she prays with her, and she gets saved. She leads her to the Lord. She has something, I don't even know what she said to the lady. She leads her to the Lord. And what happened that I thought was the coolest is that her husband, they came in together, but they went separate. Her husband got saved as well in a different team. They both got saved individually, and I was sitting in that tent, and it was like, man, today is a good day. And I didn't realize that my friend who had talked to the lady, she had gone to the prophetic artist that morning, asked her to paint what you see, and she painted right here on her eye a peacock feather. The O of the peacock feather.
Man, you can't make that up.
And so it was like the picture was that she was the one that was actually going to lead her
that is so
to the
great.
Lord.
So, John, we haven't even scratched the surface of what I wanted to cover today. So, do you mind if we do a part 2?
Oh, no, let's go for it.
Okay, great. So you don't want to miss next week, where we'll have Prophet Jon West back on to talk all about his adventures at Burning Man, and we'll unpack more of the prophetic. Join us next Saturday here on Lift TV, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central.